Hello, and welcome to the Introductory BioGenesis lecture. This is a good place for you to start if you don't know very much about biogenesis, if you haven't heard about it before, if a friend told you to learn some about biogenesis, or maybe if it's been a while since you heard about biogenesis. This is a lecture that is going to give you lots of information that you will want at some point in time. Information such as what is biogenesis? How do we have it? Where does it come from? How do you use it in your life? We're going to go over all of that information in this lecture. Now, this lecture is actually going to be a fairly long lecture, probably about 4 hours long, but we're going to take several breaks during it so that you can watch this lecture at your own pace. You can take breaks, you can watch it over the course of a few days, or if you just want to spend one evening sitting down watching it, you can do that as well. You'll be able to watch it at your own pace. Before we get started with the lecture, you may want to download the lecture handouts that are on the web page that contained this video, this link. This will provide you with the information that I will be reading from Latos. So if you want to know his exact words from the messages that I'll be reading, those course handouts will tell that to you. They'll also give you some information about specific tools and what they do, what they're used for. If you don't have the ability to download that information or to print it, don't worry. This lecture is going to be designed to provide you with all the information you need to understand biogenesis as well. This is an introductory lecture, which means there are many more advanced lectures available. Go to our website and look at the video lectures page. You'll be able to see all of those advanced lectures. But this is a good place to start. So let's go ahead and get started. Biogenesis is a technology to make life better. It is a technology using an energy called Genesis energy. We place this energy into glass tools. Those tools then radiate this special energy to their environments, and that means to your body, your home, your workplace. The Genesis energy restores harmony, and it does it on every level, which means that you can use the tools to help with physical problems in your body. You can use the tools to help with emotional issues, with mental issues. You can use the tools to help with relationships, family relationships, close relationships, friends, professional relationships. You can use the tools to help on a broad scale, such as for the world, for the environment, for society. You can use it for very specific purposes, just for yourself, your family, your children, your friends. Biogenesis is a technology simply to make life better, and we're going to be learning all about it during this lecture. Now, I always start each lecture with a story of something that took place a long time ago, back in 1972, at the home of a woman named Hannah Kroger. Hannah Kroger, for those of you who have not heard of her or didn't know her, was a remarkable woman. She was a pioneer, really. She was listed by New Life magazine as one of the 6 holistic pioneers of the 20th century. She founded the very first health food store west of the Mississippi River in the United States of America. Now, for those of you in the United States, you know how big a deal that is, but for those of you in other parts of the world, what that means is that this woman founded the very first health food store in the western half of the United States of America. So she truly was a pioneer, and she was my mother's best friend. We met Hannah because my father is a dentist here in Colorado. And back in 1972, he had a patient who came to him, a man who needed a tooth pulled, but he wanted it done without any painkiller. And my dad looked at the man and he said, "Well, I can't do that." The man said, "Sure you can. Call this woman, she'll tell you how to do it." He gave my dad Hannah's phone number, and it piqued my dad's interest. That evening, my father got my mother, my sister, my brother, and me in the car, took us up to Boulder, Colorado, so that we could meet this woman who could supposedly teach him how to pull teeth without any Novocaine, without any painkiller. Well, we met Hannah, and we just immediately fell in love with her. Very quickly, she and my mom became best friends. And it wasn't long after that before Hannah decided that it was time for her grandchildren to start learning more about spirituality. She had looked around town, but didn't really find anything that truly spoke to her. So she decided she would teach them herself. And she was wondering if my family would like to be a part of it. She called Mom, told her about this, checked to see if Mom thought we would be interested in joining Hannah's family and learning about this, and Mom said sure. Hannah had an estate on the outskirts of town with a large main house and several smaller outbuildings. We took one of the smaller outbuildings. It was actually a chicken coop, and there were chickens in it. We kicked the chickens out and swept the dirt floors, put boards along the side, and that became our little chapel. It was little. It was only about 15 feet by 20 feet. For those of you in other parts of the country, only about 4 meters, 5 meters by 8 meters. It was a very small room, small building. We met there each Sunday, and Hannah would talk to us about spirituality. On the very first Sunday that we did this, we all gathered. We were sitting on the benches along the walls. Hannah spoke to us, and after about 10 minutes, she stopped. She said, "That's all I have to say." Right then, a tall man walked in the door. Since it was a small building, there was only one door. This man was tall, probably 6.5 feet tall, so a little over 2 meters tall, wearing a long, flowing white robe with a tall hat, like a high priest's hat. And he had to stoop down to make it through the doorway. Then he stood up and he walked right in. He didn't say hi. He didn't introduce himself. He just walked right on in. And he started going around to each one of us who was there. He would put his hand on our shoulder. And then he would tell the individual their gift of the Holy Spirit for this embodiment. When he came to my sister, Cindy, he looked at her and he said, "You will bring great light to the world." Well, he finished going around to each one of us who was there. And then he walked out the door. We all looked at each other and followed him outside. Those of us who were children, we were just off playing, but Mom was standing next to this man, and Hannah was standing next to my mom. My mom turned and looked at this man. He turned and looked at my mother. And he said, "Your daughter has great vision. Believe her when she tells you she sees things. She is to bring great light to the world." This just charged my mom with an energy. She turned to look at Hannah. Now, in contrast to this very tall man, Hannah was not very tall, but she was full of energy. And she clasped my mom's hands together, and she was jumping up and down, and she said, "He's a holy man. He's a holy man. Believe him. Believe what he tells you." And Mom said, "Well, I do." She turned to look at the man, but he was gone. Now, this was in the middle of an open field, hundreds of yards every direction, open field. The parking lot was right there. He hadn't taken a car. Mom turned to Hannah. She said, "Did you see where he went?" And Hannah said, "No." They actually checked to see if he hid behind a couple of the trees. He, of course, hadn't. He had simply disappeared. And yet each one of us had seen him. Each one of us had heard him. Most of us had physically touched him. And then he disappeared. That experience stayed with my family. Well, even before then, we knew that my sister had the ability to see things that the rest of us couldn't see. Even when she was only 3 years old, she would wake my mom up in the middle of the night to let her know that there were things flying around her bedroom. Mom would come in and turn on the light. She'd look around. She wouldn't see anything. Cindy would say, "Well, can't you see them? They're just right up there." So we knew that she had the ability to see things the rest of us couldn't see. And over the years, those abilities grew. They continued to develop. Cindy became very accustomed to seeing angels and other types of celestial beings. But then in October of 1997, things changed. Cindy was sitting in her bed, resting quietly one morning with her two young daughters asleep next to her, when another tall man appeared at the foot of her bed. This one was about 7.5 feet tall, so close to 2.5 meters tall, wearing a long, flowing golden robe with what appeared to be golden jewels down the front. Unlike the angels and other types of celestial beings that Cindy was very accustomed to seeing, this man appeared almost physically, tangibly there. Cindy looked at him. She was thinking, well, this is a little different. And then he spoke to her. Using a physical voice, he said, "You know who I am." And that caught my sister's attention because this was the very first time that any of these beings had ever spoken to her. And he used a physical voice, just as I'm speaking to you. Cindy's first thought was, wow, he spoke to me. That was immediately followed by the realization that she didn't actually remember who he was, and she was feeling a little embarrassed about that. But then he said for her to go get a pen and paper to write down what he was going to say. So she went into the kitchen, got a pen and paper, came back, and he gave her a telephone number. It was a phone number for a doctor in California. As it turned out, a close family friend had recently been in a car accident. This doctor had information that assisted in his recovery. But that was it. That was all he did. He gave her this phone number, then he disappeared. Immediately after that, Cindy called our mother. Now, in my family, we have a very simple phone tree. You call mom, she calls everybody else. So Cindy called mom, mom called the rest of us. We all got together for lunch, and Cindy told us what had happened. We all had the same question. Who was he? And Cindy said, I don't know. We said, well, he said you knew who he was. And she said, yes, but I don't remember. We said, you should ask him next time. Cindy said, I don't think there will be a next time. He just came to give me this phone number, then he disappeared. Well, a couple of weeks later, there was a next time. Immediately after that, Cindy called mom. Mom called the rest of us. We all got together for lunch again with the same question. Did you find out who he was? And Cindy said, no. We said, well, did you ask? And Cindy said, I don't think I can ask questions. He just comes, he has something to say, he says it, then he disappears. Well, we prevailed upon her that he probably wouldn't be too offended if she actually asked him a question every now and then. So a week later, he came a third time. And this time, Cindy asked him, what is your name? Now, for those of you who printed up the handouts, you can go ahead and read along with me. Cindy asked him, what is your name? He said, I am who you know as an ascended master. I have gone by many names over the ages. However, the time which allowed for our togetherness was last in the Mediterranean. I was known as Kesslar. Before that, I worked with many of the high order of priestesses and priests in Atlantis. We worked to bring peace to those who wished for good. We offered light when many were surrounded by the dark. There I was known as Andal Lantos. In the assemblies, I am given the name Lantos. I am many things to many people. I am here now to offer my assistance and blessings to all who will seek it. This is a time where many of our assembly are ready to give help as Earth enters her new phase. It will be a great transformation. So then we knew who he was and what he was, an ascended master named Lantos. And over the next year and a half, my family was just privileged to receive information from him on a broad range of topics. But then in February of 1999, things changed again. Lantos came to Cindy excited about the return of a technology. A technology, he said, that was many millions of years old, but which had not been on Earth since the days of Atlantis. He instructed her to build a device that would be in the shape of a pyramid, much larger than this one. It would be made out of wood instead of glass, and it would be tipped on its side. What would normally have been the base of this pyramid would now be hollow. It would be the mouthpiece of this device. There would be certain items that would be permanently placed inside this device. Once it was built and assembled, Lantos explained he would come and he would place an energy into this device, an energy called Genesis energy. Well, my family spent the next couple of weeks building this device. And then Lantos came. He placed the energy into it. And afterwards, he explained that it had been a great blessing for the family, a great blessing for our neighborhood, for our community, a great blessing for the entire earth. So then we knew that we had this device, this special device, a Genesis device, that it held this special energy in it, this Genesis energy. But we didn't really know anything else about it. We didn't know what the energy was. We didn't know what the technology was. We knew it was called BioGenesis, but we didn't know anything else about it. So over the next few weeks, Cindy asked Lantos several questions. She started simply with, what is biogenesis? Again, this is in your handouts. Lantos said, biogenesis is the birth of creation. We instill the remembrance of the process of creation into a substance, and that substance radiates or re-educates its environment. All knowledge is contained in its seed form in the process of 8 transformations associated with creation. Let us embrace this precious technology handed down from Atlantean days. Let us transform our homes and our lives into beacons for the light of peace and generation. This is a timely endeavor. This technology must be applied in the homes. Together, many individual lights create a city. We are structuring a city of light, the light of creation, the light of Genesis. A few days later, Lantos continued. He said, the birth of creation is the process of assembling substance and form capable of vibrating in the mode of resonance generated by the body of Genesis. As with all things in creation, energy gathers form around it. Intention clothes itself with a substance identical in structure, but of a denser quality. Let us review these shapes, which will serve as the vital limbs and organs of biogenesis. Lantos continued. He went on. He said, biogenesis creates harmony. I will say this again. Biogenesis creates harmony. It is important to realize that harmony is structured quite simply, quite effectively, by strengthening the inherent qualities of a region. And this is accomplished by enlivening the sequence of initial rotations. This is biogenesis. Cindy asked Lantos, what would be some of the effects of this energy, of this technology? What could be some of the results that we would expect to see? And Lantos went through a few different things, but then he said this, the physical effects belonging to the category of expected results are numerous. Any disease born of irregularity is a disease born of loss of memory and is thus reversible through the biogenesis products. Degenerative diseases or disorders born of stress are the results of the corruption of biological harmony. Biogenesis structures wholeness. The biogenesis products restore harmony. Spiritually, the effects are unlimited. If we say this to the people, they will not believe us. But we can be sure that the influence of the initialization of even one Genesis device has been carried through and beyond this universe. Well, then we knew a little bit more about biogenesis. What we had in this Genesis device, this big wooden pyramid tipped on its side, was an energy called Genesis energy. And that energy is very simple. It contains merely a memory. It is the memory of the process of the birth of creation. Now, that's not any historical point in time. Rather, it's the actual process by which energy surrounds itself with form. creating matter, creating an atom, for example. The memory of that process is what is contained within the Genesis energy. And when that energy comes into contact with anything else, such as your body or even non-living structure, all it does is it restores that memory of that process of creation. Now, restoring the memory of the process of creation actually enlivens the process of creation. And enlivening the process of creation restores harmony. And it does it on every level. The trick is then how to get that Genesis energy out of the device and into your body, your home, your workplace. For that, we use tools. Lantos explained to Cindy that glass, along with some other materials, has the ability, when it takes on the Genesis energy, to turn around and radiate that energy to its environment without degradation. He told Cindy to find a glass pyramid. Well, my family didn't really know where to find a glass pyramid, but we actually had a friend who had a company in Germany. And this friend knew another company that made glass products. And we knew that they made sort of pyramids. We called them up, asked them if they had pyramids. They said yes. They showed us these. We ordered some. They shipped them out to us. We received them. We unpacked them. We put them in the Genesis device. They went in and out several times over a period of time. That's the training process, during which we take a piece of glass, put it into the Genesis device. The glass takes on the Genesis energy. When it comes out of the device that final time, it then holds the energy, but it also radiates it to its environment. So we took these pyramids, we put them into the Genesis device. They went in and out several times over this training period. At the end of that period of time, they came back out one final time. And then they were the same pyramids that we got from Germany, but now they held this energy in it, this Genesis energy. And because they were glass, they not only held the energy, but they were able to radiate that energy to their environments without degradation. We still didn't know what they were supposed to do, though. We knew that Lantos said they would restore harmony, but we didn't know anything else. We only had a handful of them. Each family member got one. Each of our distributors got just one. And we told them, we don't really know what to expect. Why don't you guys tell us what you notice having the pyramid around? Well, Hannah Kroger's retreat up in Boulder, Colorado happened to be one of our distributors. And at this point in time, back in the spring of 1999, they were just beginning their spring and summer class schedule. That meant that every week they would bring in 30, 40 people for a class. Those people would stay there all week long. They would be around the pyramid all week long. Then they would leave at the weekend and go home. So we had a captive audience every week. What we heard early on from that group was experiences of greater harmony, usually greater interpersonal harmony. People saying, I'm getting along better with others. I'm getting along better with my family. I'm getting along better with my friends. Simply, I'm getting along better. But we also heard people sleeping better at night, people being happier. Simply harmony. After several weeks, we kept hearing these experiences over and over again, and we were thinking, well, this must be what Lantos meant when he said that the pyramid restores harmony. A few weeks later, we got a phone call from a group of people who had stayed at the retreat all spring. They were going to be there all summer long. They had now been around the pyramid for a couple of months. They called us up with a question we had not anticipated. They wanted to know if Cindy could ask Lantos if their pyramid still worked. They told us that, like all of the other groups, they had noticed greater harmony. They noticed this during the first several weeks, but then they started having arguments, disagreements. Negativity was coming up, and they were wondering if their pyramid still worked. They were thinking, you know what, maybe this thing absorbs negativity and now it's just full, and we need to find a way to cleanse it some way so that it can soak up more negativity. Or Alternatively, maybe it's like a battery, and it has only so much energy in it. It has only so much of that Genesis energy in it, and now it has run out. And we need to put it back in the Genesis device to recharge it, to put more energy in it. So they were wondering if Cindy could ask Lantos about this. And so she did. Again, from your handouts, Cindy asked, once the biogenesis tools are in an individual's home, is it possible for the tools to then hold a negative energy in any way or form? Lantos said the tools of biogenesis cannot hold an impression, negative or positive. The tools of biogenesis are living expressions of the sequence of initial rotations in creation. The sequence of creation does indeed reflect a value of time, but on a scale much grander than human awareness can comprehend. The memory pattern of events which occur in this generation or many generations to come shall have no impact on the functional capacity of the biogenesis materials. Cindy wanted to make sure she understood correctly, so she said, so there's no negativity that can be stored in them? And Lantos said, biogenesis is ever renewing. Biogenesis is ever refreshing. Biogenesis is ever restoring. No cleansing is necessary with these tools. What this means is once one of the pieces of glass, once one of the glass tools goes into the Genesis device, it goes in and out several times. It comes out holding the Genesis energy within it. Once the Genesis energy has been placed within the glass tool, it will stay there for several hundred years. The passage of many generations will not see a decrease in the effectiveness of that energy in that tool. And during that period of time, the tool never needs to be cleansed. The energy in the tool never needs to be cleansed. Cindy asked Lantos another question about negativity. Lantos said, now is the time to rid the halls of darkness. Let the darkness find swift passage. As the months progress, the timely importance of this great disbursement of light through biogenesis shall become apparent. It is a great opportunity and a great responsibility. Let us see that the light of biogenesis spreads rapidly, illumining the darkened regions of this earth. We provided these answers to that group at the retreat, and they came back to us with more questions. They told us that they had doused and measured 19 negative thought forms just hovering around their pyramid. And they were wondering if Cindy could ask Lantos what was going on with that. Why were all of those negative thought forms just hovering around the pyramid? So Cindy asked him. Lantos said, the relationship of the pyramid with the negative thought form is that of the father with the prodigal son. The son returns, wishing to be restored to the proper dignity of the light. The father invites the prodigal son to remain close until the transformation is complete. As we described, the biogenesis pyramid is the best teacher. It educates the environment. It restores harmony. Biogenesis pyramids train objects with breath as well as those without breath. The changes are brought about more swiftly than you would expect. The negativities do not leave as negative thought forms. A great transformation occurs. Light is restored. Do not be alarmed by the numbers a great teacher may educate. A great teacher may communicate effectively to hundreds at once. Place the pyramid high for all to see. Cindy asked Lantos if the pyramid would end up absorbing those negative thought forms that were hovering around it. Lantos said, no, the great teacher never embraces the ignorance of the student. The light shines and the darkness is removed. Cindy asked Lantos a final question about the negative thought forms around the pyramid. She was worried if there were so many negative thought forms around a pyramid, what would happen to someone who was in the room, someone who was near the pyramid? If you walked by it, were those negative thought forms going to try to mug you, for example? So she asked Lantos about this, and Lantos said, no, like moths to the flame, the attention of negative thought forms is fixed upon the biogenesis pyramid. We gave these answers to that group at the retreat, and they told us that what had happened in retrospect, is exactly what Lantos described, a cleansing, a catharsis. They told us that, like the other groups, they had early on noticed greater harmony, especially greater interpersonal harmony. But then, after several weeks, they started having negativity come up, and it came up in the form of arguments, disagreements. And that lasted for a couple of weeks, but then it subsided, and what they were left with was even greater harmony than they had before they brought in the pyramid. The pyramid, the biogenesis pyramid, restores harmony, and it does so principally in a two-step process. The first step is establishing a stable foundation of harmony. When you introduce the pyramid to an environment, it will immediately get to work on establishing a stable foundation of harmony. Once that has been accomplished, it will then get to work on the second step. This is the removal of negativity. The pyramid will begin to remove negativity from the environment, and it will do so as quickly as possible, but without endangering that foundation of harmony that had been created. So it acts intelligently. It won't remove the negativity so quickly as to endanger the foundation of harmony that had been created. Now, normally what we have heard with the pyramid is just what we saw at the pyramid, at the retreat. People will tell us that they brought the pyramid home, they put it up, and they noticed a difference. They said that they were getting along better with their spouse, with their children. Their children were getting along better with each other. Simply greater harmony. And then usually, after a few weeks, they'll start to have arguments come up again. But those arguments are more shallow than before. Once the arguments are over, the person realizes they actually have more harmony, greater harmony than they had before the argument started. So it acts intelligently. I was giving an introductory lecture down in Florida, in the panhandle of Florida, all the way back in the fall of 1999. Now, back then, we charged to attend the lectures. They were short lectures, only about 2 hours long, and we charged $10 to attend. So it was a small fee, a nominal fee, but there was still a fee. I was getting ready to start this lecture, and a woman walked up to me. She introduced herself, and she gave me a drawing of an angel. She had drawn it herself, and it was just beautiful. And then she explained that she didn't have the $10 to be able to attend the lecture, and she was hoping that I would accept this drawing in lieu of the $10. And I said, of course. And it really was a beautiful drawing. Well, she sat through the lecture. At the end of the lecture, she walked up to me and she said, "I'd like to buy the whole kit, please." Well, this was a little bit of a surprise. She pulled out a credit card. She looked at me conspiratorially. She said, "My husband doesn't know about this credit card." And I just smiled at her and I nodded. I happened to have the pyramid there and a couple other tools. I gave those to her. But everything else was going to get shipped out from the office, so I needed a shipping address for her, a place to ship the tools. She wrote down a P.O. box address, a post office box address. For those of you in other countries, that means that she rented a small box at a local post office where she could receive mail and shipments. She looked up at me and she said, "My husband doesn't know about this P.O. box either." And I just smiled at her and I nodded. And then she told me why she was using a credit card her husband didn't know about and a P.O. box her husband didn't know about. She told me that she was concerned that her husband would try to kill her if he found out that she spent money on glass tools with some sort of a spiritual energy in them. She told me that her husband beat her. They had young children, he beat them as well. Hers was about the most negative, acrimonious household environment that you could begin to imagine, and she actually was concerned that her husband might try to kill her. 2 weeks later, I called her up to see that she had received the rest of the items. She said yes, she had. And then she said, something interesting happened. That night after the lecture, I went home. I took the pyramid I went into my living room. I hid it behind some books on the top shelf of a bookshelf. I knew my husband would never find it there. Then she paused and she said, in the last 2 weeks, my husband hasn't been abusive a single time. He hasn't even gotten angry. She explained that was the longest period of time since they had been married that her husband had gone without being violent. 8 months later, she called me back to let me know that the beatings had never resumed. She said, I don't know exactly when it happened or how, but at some point along the line, my husband just started treating me and the children like we're people. So in her case, the pyramid started that first step, establishing a stable foundation of harmony, as soon as it was introduced to her home. But then in her case, it would be many, many months, perhaps even years, before it would begin that second step, the removal of negativity. And in her case, it would do so perhaps only a little bit at a time, so as not to endanger that foundation of harmony that had been created. This is what I mean when I say that the pyramid acts intelligently. And this is what Lantos meant when he said that biogenesis restores harmony. Let's go ahead and take a short break. Pause the playback, take a short break, then we'll come back and we're going to talk about some of the other tools. We'll talk about the flame of Genesis. Let's take a break.